Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Kaylee. I am a Florida wedding and portrait photographer based out of Jacksonville, and I'm so glad you're here because today's video is a really special video. So normally on this channel, I edit a lot of film scans and match a lot of digital and film scans because I'm a hybrid photographer, but today I'm not editing my film scans. I'm editing your film scans, which is really exciting. And then at the end of the video, if you stick around, I have two really great free resources for you to just serve you and be able to give you some inspiration during this whole virus thing that's going on. So if you stick around towards the end of the video, you can get those free resources. But let's go ahead and hop into this video. I am really excited about this. So I'm sitting outside on my back porch this morning and it's teeming with life out here, and there are a lot of sounds going on, but I hope that that will help you close your eyes and imagine that you're sitting out here in my rocking chairs on my back porch, so we can talk about your film scans. You can bring a cup of coffee, you can bring some sweet tea, and we can just rock the morning away and talk about film scans. That sounds like an incredible morning to me, but this is going to be really, really fun this morning. So sometime last week, I put out an Instagram post asking if there was any interest in me editing your film scans or editing some digital scans or whatever you want to send me. If you're new at film or not so new at film, or you shot a new film stock, just send me your scans and I can either edit them for you for a specific look, or like my look, or I can critique them for you. And I got so many great responses and so many different types of images. But today we're going to focus on some film scans from two of my Kindred Spirit Tribe girls, Rebecca and Candace. They sent me some of their film scans, and I'm really, really impressed with these scans actually, because there are three different types of film here in this little, pool of images here, and I think that they're all beautiful. But both girls messaged me with these film scans and said that they wanted some help getting them to be a little brighter. And also Candace said she wanted some more pop. She felt like her images were just a little dark. So we're going to walk through some of these today, and we're going to see what we can do with them and see what you can learn on the way. I got a lot of really positive responses about editing on my iPad, so I'm going to do this on my iPad again, and we're going to see how this goes. So everything in the top row here is all Portra 400, I believe, if I remember correctly. This bottom left image here with the motorcycle is, or the dirt bike is, Ektar 100, and then the butterfly image here is Portra 160. So we have a plethora of Kodak films here, which I'm really excited because I love Kodak. I shoot exclusively with Kodak, and this is like my sweet spot when it comes to film. So I'm really, really pumped to do this. Okay, so let's go ahead and start here. This is Candace's image. Candace is a little girl. She is just so precious. I was looking at these yesterday, and I just think that she's just the cutest little thing. So, with Candace's questions, with your questions that you had, you were wanting this to be a little like brighter and have a little bit of pop. And so what I'm going to do with your images, or with pretty much all the images here, is I'm going to show you what I personally do to not only lighten and brighten an image, but also make it a little bit more luminant, because you have the neatest thing going on. You have sun coming right in over her head right here, which just adds the neatest little halo around her head. That's just so pretty. And you can see a little bit of light going on back here. But I think it's really important to add brightness and luminance, not only in like the lights and the shadows, like as far as elements of light go, but I really think it's important to do it in your colors as well, because I think that an image can turn out looking a little bit flat if you don't do anything to your colors. So let's just go into this, and let's do like some of the easy stuff first. I'm going to go ahead and pump this up. I'm going to only go to 20 right now, because I'm going to do I'm going to fill in some of these shadows back here in just a moment, and I don't want my general exposure to be too bright. So I'm going to bring up the contrast just a little bit here. I like that in this Lightroom program, that if you don't want to fine tune your images here, you can just kind of tap on one end and it takes it up by like 5 ticks at a time. I'm only going to go up by 10 clicks for contrast there. Let's go down to shadows. I'm going to bring up my shadows a little. Now with film scans, you want to be really careful bringing up your shadows if your images are really dark, because that can expose a lot of grain. So do you see a lot of grain that's coming up right here? I'm not going to push the shadows too far. You can do that with digital, but I'm not going to do that too far with film scans, because you can end up with a really grainy, washed out look. So I don't have very many whites to bring down, but that's my normal workflow. So I'm going to bring down whites a little bit, and then blacks are going to give us a little bit of that depth, a little bit of depth going on. So I'm going to bring down my blacks just a little bit. Okay, yep, that looks good. Okay, so now that I have like just this general lighting kind of fixed right now, I'm going to go ahead and go to my color really quick. So I see a lot of greens going on in her pants right here just because I lightened things up a little bit. So I'm just going to take up the temperature by 2 clicks. Actually, maybe just 1 right now, and I'll adjust it again in a moment if I feel like I need it. And then I'm going to bring up my tint 2 clicks here, so it's at +10, just so I can kind of balance out some of that green that I saw in her pants. But obviously, this is already a warm image, and if I take my tint up too far to get rid of all that green, it's going to look like this, and I don't think that looks quite right. So I'm going to bring this back down to 10. Would I have it at 10? Yeah. Okay. Oop. Nope. I'm just going to do the easy little clicky. No, come back. Okay, 510. So okay, that looks all right to me right now. Okay, so here are two little toggles that I've really been enjoying playing with. I've enjoyed bringing up the vibrance a little bit because, like I said before, like it helps to really adjust your lighting and your shadows and stuff, your highlights and different blacks and whites and stuff in your image to really add that depth. But I think that your image is going to turn out flat if you don't control your color as well. So I'm going to bring up my vibrance and I'm going to pump my saturation just a little bit. Okay, all right, so that looks good to me. So I think that it's really important to do your color really early on because your all of your adjustments that you do, your major adjustments in light, your light panel are really going to change the way your colors look. So I know I did like a little bit of adjustment here, but I wanted to bring that up and have like a starting place with all of my exposure and contrast, highlight, shadows, whites, and black adjustments before I went into color. And so now that my color is set, for now, I'm going to go back, and it's kind of like a dance back and forth. It's kind of just like going back and forth and playing with it until you see something that you like. But I'm going to up my contrast a little more and go ahead and push my exposure. Now that I know that my color is set, I'm going to go ahead and push my exposure. Nope, that's a little too much. Yeah, let's keep it at 50 and then continue to bring my exposure up. So now that my color's up, has been shifted a little bit by my by what I've done to my light, I'm going to go ahead and push that temperature one more time. Yeah, and bring up that tint one more time. Oh my gosh, it's getting so pretty. And then lastly, it's kind of like my secret sauce almost, is going to be in the tone curve. So this is a lot easier to navigate on desktop or on your laptop, like the actual Lightroom Classic, not Lightroom Mobile, because you can actually see what tabs you're shifting and like what settings you're changing, but you can't really tell what you're shifting and changing here. But most of the time I figured out that these two panels here, like these two little spots here, are what I end up playing with the most. So I'm going to, they kind of represent to me, I think, what is it, like the highlights and the shadows, I think, maybe. Take that with a grain of salt. You might want to look for it yourself in the desktop version of Lightroom. But so I'm just going to take this here and I'm going to bring this up just a little, and then bring this. Yeah, see, this here's your highlights a little bit. I'm going to bump down my highlights some, and then bring that up just a little, maybe a little more. Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, I got it. Ooh, that's so pretty. And then I'm going to bring my exposure back down just a little bit because see the luminance that I put into her cheeks here, her sweet little cheeks, and then down on her feet and her toes. It's not washed out yet. You still have your highlights in the back. Still looks really good. Okay, and I think that's everything. What would it look like at 30? Let's keep it up at 40. And then pump down those highlights just a little bit. Okay, and this looks good. I think I might go back to my temperature and bring it up one more time. 15's a little much. I might just go up to like 13, 12. Yeah, 12 is good. Okay, and that's the final result. Here's my before, and here's my after. Oh, that's so pretty. I love it. So cute. Okay, let's move on to our next one. Oh, I love this. I think, Rebecca, didn't you send me this? The Lightroom mixed up my images a little bit. So this won't take very long at all. This is so pretty. Rebecca requested that her images be a little bit brighter and warmer. And when I first look at this, I think, wow, this is already a pretty warm image because Portra is a very warm film. You're going to find some really warm images when you shoot with Portra 400, both 35mm and 120. So I love this image here. Not only is it cute because the little puppy dog is here and she's sweet little dress on her sweet little girl, and also the dog's collar is pink and it matches her dress. I think that's just so cute. But it looks like she is in a really clean, even light. If you look at her face here, she doesn't have very many shadows under her eyes. There aren't deep shadows under her chin. It might have been an overcast day, I think, with this, I think I could tell in the sky back there, or maybe it was early morning or evening or something, but she was in really great, even light, and so it's not going to take much to really bring up all the elements of this image and make it really bright and warm and dynamic. So let's go ahead and start with light, and I'm going to take this on up. Oh yes, I'm going to take this up to about 80 for now. And I'm going to push up my contrast to, see, look at all the luminance that I just added. Sometimes if you're in really good clean light, just exposure and contrast can do wonders. So she has a white dress here, which didn't lose any of its detail, but I'm going to reserve those highlights just a little bit, just to make sure we don't lose any detail in her dress. There aren't really many shadows to work with. There's not a lot going on at all, so I'm going to leave that alone. I'm going to bring my whites down just a tad, and then my blacks I'm going to bring down on the opposite end just a little bit to give some depth to back to the puppy dog here, your cute little Doberman that you have, and okay, so now that I'm done with light, I'm going to bring up my color. So in my personal opinion, I probably wouldn't up the temperature on this at all because it's already so warm, but I'm just for the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to bump it up and show you what it looks like when it's warmer, because that might be your style, your edge, which I really like that. So 5 or 10, you know what, I'm going to bring up, let's see what my tint would do. A little bit more magenta, a little more green, maybe, yeah, I guess my tint, I really don't need anything on my tint. Tint can sometimes be the hardest thing for me because I'm never really sure which way to go, because tint's such a elusive character in images. Okay, so I'm probably just going to leave that just as is. I'm going to bring it over to the green side just because it looks so warm. Naturally, like all of the dynamics of Portra work really well with taking your tint down on the green side just a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to bring up my vibrance by 5 and my saturation by none because that looks a little too saturated to me. It's really this balance and this dance between vibrance and saturation for me. It's a back and forth. Sometimes vibrance works and saturation doesn't, and then sometimes it's vice versa, and sometimes both work and sometimes both don't work. You'll just have to play around with it and see what you like and what looks good to you. So, okay, so this is what I've got so far. Here is before and here is after. What I'm going for when I'm satisfied with an image is that if their skin tone and their faces are really, really pretty and really good. So I see an image here that I really like. I can still see the detail in her cute little dress. I said, oh my gosh, I just noticed her little earrings, so cute. Her highlights may be a little bit blown here. Let me take the highlights down just a tad. There we go. Okay. No, I'm not going to take down those highlights. They don't look too blown to me. Okay, so again, that's just a little bit of a back and forth. It's just a little dance. You got to see what works for you and what doesn't. But I think that looks good to me. I'm happy with the warmth. I'm happy with the saturation. If you would want to even go further with the luminance in her face, I would even add a little bit more contrast and then bring up those highlights a little more, actually down just one. Yep. And that would even make, because if you have really even light, you can do wonders with an image. And I think this looks really, really good. So sweet. I just want to zoom in on that face and just leave it. So precious. Everybody's sending, is this your little girl? I hope these are pictures of your little girls, these two here, because they're just so cute. Okay. And I think that looks all right to me. So my main adjustments I did there were I upped my light and my contrast, which did a lot for this image because it had really clean light. And then as far as color goes, oops, not effects, color goes, I just adjusted my temperature on my tint just a tad little bit in either direction, and then worked on vibrance as far as adding some depth in color. So that looks good to me. Okay, let's move on. Here's another image on Portra. I'm a big fan of landscapes right now. This is so neat to me, and it's not going to take much to really bring this image up. So just a little bit of background about Portra. Portra is a contrasty film. It is not a neutral contrast film at all. Portra is made for portraits. It's made for capturing detail on people's faces. It's made to really retain the integrity of the depth of portraits and images and stuff. And I always think, you know, like those really old-fashioned, like, not old-fashioned, but like paintings of old kings and queens and royals and stuff, where the painter has added so much depth to the folds of the fabric on their dress and the jewels on their sashes and their crowns and stuff. Sometimes I look at those paintings, I'm like, oh, that was done with a portrait painter. You know, I don't know if that makes sense or not, but they that portrait film really captures like the folds and the depths of elements of images. And I just really, really love Portra for that reason. It's like it adds a lot of just richness and vibrance and depth in your images without really having to do a lot of post adjustment. So I'm actually going to take a different route here, and I'm going to add my personal preset that I really like to use on my images. And there's my personal preset. All it is brightness and contrast, and then maybe like 1 or 2 clicks of warmth. And I'm actually going to bring that warmth up just a little. And let's see how far we can push the warmth here before it gets to be a little wonky. Nope, right about at 6. Let's do 50. Right about at 50. I'm going to make sure my contrast is up some. My highlights are retained. This is just such a pretty image. Like, you can still see the blue in the sky here. Let me exit out of this. You can still see like the blue in the sky over here. This is really neat. I also love old buildings too. I like imagining what they were so long ago. Oh, you can see through the windows here, all the detail on the side. And of course you're going to see a little bit of darkness over here, but you can still see a little bit of the detail and the shadows in there. That's what's so good about Portra, y'all. See those details in the shadow over here? Okay, I'm getting a little babbly. Let's move on. So what I did there was I did my exposure and my contrast. Normal highlights and whites are brought down a little, and then the shadows are brought up. And just to retain a little bit of depth, I'm going to bring my blacks down just a hint. And then as far as color goes, I went up 1 click on my color, and my natural setting on this preset is that my vibrance comes up plus 15. I've been really having a lot of fun with the vibrance lately. I think it really adds a lot of luminance in your color. And so going back to what I said at the beginning, we have to add luminance and depth and vibrance in both our highlights and shadows, like our lighting adjustments, and then also our color adjustments. And so vibrance is what I've been really having a lot of fun with lately as far as making those adjustments in color. So I'm going to actually come to my saturation and, all right, come on saturation, what you doing? And bring up my saturation plus 5. Okay. I think that looks good to me. It looks warm enough to me. It doesn't look too overly cool like in some of the darker parts over here. Here's your before, and here's your after. Easy peasy. Okay. And I love that. That's awesome. Okay, let's go to this one. Ooh, this is challenging. I love this. So I see what you mean, Rebecca, when this is too dark for your liking and you want to know how to bring up your, just make it lighter and brighter and warmer. And so I think that when it comes to this particular image, like technically I love this image. It's very different than what you see from light and bright and airy, but it still has character and you can still do a lot with it if you wanted to. But going back to like when you're shooting, I think that it's important here to perhaps give you a tip on metering and light metering. I'm not sure if you used a light meter for this or not, but Portra can handle overexposure really, really well. I mean, almost just as well as Fuji Pro 400H. But Portra is really, really good overexposed and underexposed. There's a cool video on YouTube about the exposure limits of Portra. Maybe I'll link it down below so you can actually see how far you can push Portra and pull Portra before it starts to lose its integrity. But with this image here, I can definitely see what you mean in the shadows and the darkness kind of the tree, but it's easy to fix that. And then even the shadows on, is this your little boy or is this some little boy that's running around? It's so cute. I can see what you mean by it being really dark, and if that wasn't what you're going for, I can see where it'd be really frustrated. So back to your metering technique. Again, I'm not sure if you use a light meter, but I would personally rate this at box speed. And then whenever you are metering and taking your meter reading, I would actually meter for overexposure, which when you're holding your light meter, you would point it a little bit more downward towards the ground. You wouldn't point it up towards the sun. You wouldn't point it towards you. You would point it down towards the ground. And even for a little bit more security in metering for the shadows here, I would even go over here to where the tree is and stand right in the shadow of the tree and take a reading, and then stand back and take a shot like that. That may seem like a lot, but again, Portra can handle so much overexposure. So my two tips for you would be to go and stand in a darker space, or wherever the darkest part of your image is, and meter with your light meter pointed a little more downward, maybe towards angled down towards like maybe your hips or your knees or something, like just kind of point it towards one of those parts of yourself. So, and then shoot for whatever it tells you to shoot for. But as far as this goes right now, that's all said and done. And so let's see what we can do to edit this and bring this up a little bit. So I want to show you how nice it is to shoot Portra and still be able to bring up all of your shadows. Look at how easy it is. In just a few clicks, you can bring up your shadows here of that tree, and it just already looks way better. So I'm bring this down fresh again. Oop. And I'm going to push this up to, I'm going to do 120 right now. I think that's what I did when I was practicing this. I'm not going to do a lot with contrast, because contrast is going to add the shadows back into your image here in the tree. And that's like one of the darkest parts of the image. That's why I'm kind of working according to the tree here. There aren't really many highlights to focus on, so I'll only bring down highlights by just one little bit. Shadows, this is where the magic works. I'm going to bring up shadows a lot, just so we can really see what the details look like on this tree. So, I love it. I love it. I love it. Whites again are going to come down just a little, and again blacks, this is a really touchy one because I'd like to add blacks just a little bit back in, but if you add them too much, then suddenly this tree is going to become dark again. So because there's shadows, there's definitely shadows and blacks in this tree. Okay, that looks good to me. Let's look at this little guy's face. Okay, his face was, you look like you used a lower aperture here, like you maybe shot this at like 2.8 or lower or higher, I think. What did you say? You shot this with a Pentax, I think, so I guess the lowest that you can go is 2.8. But that's okay. It looks like either in front of the mailbox or a little bit before the mailbox was your focus point, which is fine, because I just like how he's kind of in the background, adding a little bit of realism to this particular image. So. Okay, let's go to your color here. So I've got color. So I think this is already a really warm image, but again, just because I wouldn't do anything to it doesn't mean that you would not, or just because I wouldn't doesn't mean that you wouldn't. So, oops. I'm just going to add one click here. And then I see a lot of green going on. A lot of green, so I'm going to pump up my tint by just like one little click, maybe 2 clicks. Yeah, that looks good. Vibrance, 1 click. Saturation, 1 click. Okay, and I think that looks okay to me. I'm actually, you know what I'm going to do here? What I'd like to do is that the green here, I know I'm so like funny about my greens and images, but the greens here look really good, but I want to just take a little bit of the green like off the edge here, just a little bit of the edge off the green. So I'm going to go into my my HSL pattern, or my HSL palette here, and I'm going to go to the greens, and I just want to bring up the luminance on these greens here, and then also bring the saturation off of the greens just a little bit. This is an extra step that you don't have to do, but just for some reason, like I know that the tree is like the biggest part of the image, but it's almost very distracting and takes away from other parts of the image here, like this little boy on his tricycle and then the beautiful landscape behind him. It just takes away from it just a little bit. So I just want to take the edge off the greens there, and I would do that by bringing up the luminance, making the greens a little bit more luminant, and then the saturation can come down just a little bit. So let's move on to our next image. Actually, here's before, really dark, and then here's the after. Oh, I love it, I love it, I love it, I love it. Okay, ooh, all right, this is from Candace. This is a whole new ball game. This was shot with Ektar, and so a little bit of a backstory. Candace actually sent me a whole gallery of Ektar just to get my opinion on it. And by the way, all of these images were processed by the Indie Film Lab, which I was super impressed with. I love the Indie Film Lab. Their scans come back so beautiful every time. They don't come back flat. They don't come back weird colored. This, her gallery was really, really beautiful, but this is the only image she actually sent me of Ektar. And so just a little bit of background on Ektar is that Ektar was made, this is Ektar 100, was made for landscapes and nature photography. It has really heavy undertones of red and magenta. And so as you can see, this is why skin tones turn out really, really red, and isn't very popular for portraits at all, because it can just really manipulate people's skin tone. And I guarantee that your kids don't have, your kids' skin isn't that red. But that's why the red on the motorcycle stood out. So this was actually the perfect film to use for this little dirt bike. This like awesome. But Ektar is for landscapes, and so they've made it a very contrasty film. Like it is way contrasty, way saturated, and definitely way on the red side. And so that's why it's not very popular in like the portrait circle of the film industry currently. So talking about like kind of adjusting or correcting this image, it is a little dark. I think just first of all, this image and the other images that you sent me, Candace, in your gallery from the Indie Film Lab were technically just beautiful. Like technically, like the technical side of things, like your exposure here is beautiful. Your composition, I really love this, how the motorcycle's kind of in the middle. And you've got just like the I guess like your lines here of the road heading up to your taller daughter up here, or maybe she's not taller, maybe it's just she's in the foreground, but just a lot of things are really, really neat. You've got the flow of the eye that works really cool. You kind of curve up from the bottom of the image here up to the motorcycle, and you follow the road line up to the right, and then you follow it up to the left, and it's just a really like nice image. Like I like this image a lot. So let's talk about correcting this. I'm going to bring up my exposure up to 50, and I'm not going to do much with contrast because again, Ektar is a way contrasty film. You hardly ever need to do anything in post with your contrast with Ektar, except maybe just to add a little bit of clarity. So exposure, contrast, I'm sorry, someone has like a weed eater or something in the background. Sorry if you can hear that. But contrast is up a little bit. My highlights, I'm going to bring them down, and shadows are coming up just a little. My whites are going to come down just a tad. Again, this is just my basic editing that I normally do. And then blacks, not even, but like one click. Click. Nope. Click. Yep, 2 little clicks. Okay, so that's all I'm going to do for light. Color-wise, ooh, this is going to be tricky. Let's see what they say about it. Yeah, see, auto didn't change very much about it at all. They cooled it off a little and then took a little off the magenta side. But yeah, I think that's honestly really all we can do with this particular image. I'm going to go back to as shot and show you what it looks like if I add warmth. So here's what it looks like if I add warmth, and here's what it looks like if I take away warmth. And here's what it looks like if I add magenta, and here's what it looks like if I add green. So what I'm going to do to this is take off, some of the, hang on, get that back to 0. I'm going to take off a tad bit off warmth and my tint. So I'm going to do, actually I'm going to add a little bit of warmth, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm going to add warmth and then make it a little bit on the green side over here just to balance out the magenta undertones. Yeah, that's making it look a lot better. A little bit warmer and bring down that tint just a little bit. Okay, so this is highly saturated, and I like highly saturated images, but I like adding saturation. And I guess whenever the situation calls for it, taking saturation away just a little bit. So I'm going to leave the vibrance as is, but I really want to question this saturation a little bit. See, I love that. I love it. I love it. It looks way more natural, looks a little more warm. And no, I don't want to take vibrance up. I played with that. I hope you saw me play with that. I don't want to take vibrance up. Maybe vibrance down just a little bit. Actually, maybe not. Maybe I'll just leave it. Okay, and that looks fairly okay to me. Let me go back to my light and bring my black down just a little so I can add some depth back into that. Okay, here is before and here is after. Okay, Ektar is really tricky to edit, but I think that's it. I think that's a good like meeting place for their skin tones and for just the color in general. So I like that a lot. There's Ektar. But yeah, as far as like Ektar goes, just a little like a hint or a tip is that Ektar isn't very popular in the portrait zone of things, but I did see one guy one time on YouTube push it 2 stops. He did it in camera. He didn't really do anything with the ISO, but it was really neat. And I'm sidetracking a little bit, rabbit trailing. But he did a portrait shoot with Ektar, and he just used his little exposure wheel or his shutter speed wheel on his camera to overexpose by 2 stops. And it turned out really neat. I don't know if I would still use it for general portraits, but maybe for a special occasion or for something out of the ordinary. I think they actually turned out really, really neat. And I haven't seen that a lot in the portrait industry, is whenever people overexpose Ektar. So that might be something to try next time. But yeah, so here's Ektar. I would definitely go with something else next time, like a Portra line or something, or maybe Fuji, or if you want to go cheap, go Kodak Gold. Kodak Gold is really good. But in the end, next time, I think you've learned this time that Ektar isn't really great for portraits, but you can still save them a little bit. And as far as this image goes, I just really love this, and you did a great job for what you were given with Ektar. So good job, Candace. Okay, lastly, this is our last image. Lastly, this is going to be easy to edit. This is Portra 160. I hope I remember that correctly. Portra 160. And coming off of an image like this and flipping over here, this looks super green. Portra 160 is a really beautiful film, but a little bit more muted, and it actually has green undertones and yellow undertones, because all Portras are fairly warm film, but with Portra 160, it has a little bit more green in it than any of the other Portra films. And so what I know right off the bat is I'm going to adjust my light, and then as far as color goes, I'm going to add a little bit of magenta to this particular image. So you have a lot of, it looks like you overexposed this intentionally, and it looks really, really beautiful, but I want to be really careful with my highlights, because its petals here on these little flowers have started to lose their integrity because they're a little bit blown, which is okay. It adds depth, I think. It's not like blown out completely, but it adds a lot of depth, which I really like. And the background, oh, so pretty. Let's go on up to, nope, too far. Let's just go up by 10. I'm going to bring up my contrast here. I'm going to bring down my highlights for sure, just to help those flower petals out a little bit. Shadows can come up. Whites can come down a little, and then blacks can come back down. That's how I like to add depth. And then my color, I'm not going to really do much with my warmth because it's already pretty warm, but I know my tint. I played with this before, and my tint has to come up like a lot. So there's my tint over to the purple side. So here's before, way, way green, and here's after. What's it look like with no warmth? No, I like it with a little bit of warmth. And then my vibrance is going to come up 1, and my saturation is going to come up 1. So I think that looks okay to me, I believe. Let's play with our tone curve a little bit. So let's bring that up just a little, and then my highlights kind of come down. Okay? And I hope that has that pop that you were looking for, Candace. I know you said you really wanted some pop. So in short, what I did here is that I brought up my exposure just a little, definitely added the contrast, because I think that this image before was already well exposed. This wasn't a dark image to me. Maybe it didn't have the luminance that you were looking for and it didn't feel as bright and airy, but it definitely was exposed, like overexposed, and exposed really, really well. So I definitely wanted to keep the integrity in the highlights and in the bright spots. So all I did was I pumped up my exposure by 10. I definitely brought up my contrast because that's what it needed. It needed a little bit of contrast to separate the butterfly from the background and everything, like with the bush and stuff that was going on in the background. This is just a great shot. I have such a hard time photographing butterflies, but you did such a really, really good job. You did a good job. So my highlights came down a little bit because I'm keeping in mind my petals here that were a little bit bright to begin with. My shadows came up because this back here was kind of a darker spot in the image. And whites and blacks were as you wish, however you want them. And then my color was very minimal as well. I added only 5, temperature-wise, 5 clicks. And then I went up to 20 on tint because it was feeling a little green. Definitely warms it up and adds a little bit of depth to it. And then vibrance and saturation are up only 5. So I hope that this has helped you a little bit, everybody. If you look at your images, let's shuffle through them one more time. So here's before and after. So pretty. Here's before and after. Before and after. Before and after. I love this. This just shows what all you can do with portrait and editing. I'd love it. Before and after. And then before and after. Okay, so I hope you all really enjoyed that. Rebecca and Candace, if you are satisfied with these and if you really, really like these, just let me know either in the comments below or shoot me an email and let me know what you liked, or if you need a little bit more help on any of these images in particular. I actually think that these 3 here, so the top left and the bottom 2 are Candace's images, and then the 3 in the middle over here are Rebecca's images, I think. But if you guys were, there was anything that you had a question about or anything specifically, please let me know in an email. I will answer your questions, and anybody else, that goes for everybody too. If you have questions or concerns, or if you want me to edit your scans as well, please feel free to send them to me at kayleetrippett@gmail.com. My email is down in the comments below, or in the information box below, and I will gladly include your scans in my next Edit Your Scans video. I also have 2 really great resources for you that I'm really excited to share with you. The first is a free Facebook community that I have created just for film photographers and hybrid photographers, and it's called Kindred & Co. Kindred & Co., a KTP community for film photographers. If you are a hybrid photographer, if you are learning film or you want to learn film, if you shoot digital and you want your scans to look, or you want your images to look like film, if you just are interested in any type of film photography, be it the actual practice of film photography or you want your images to look like film, join this group. I hope that this is a great resource for you. This is for people who love the nostalgia of film and who love the look of film and who want to use it to elevate their personal and professional elements of themselves, because I think that film photography is a really beautiful art and a really beautiful practice, and I just want to bring people together over their love of film. So go to Kindred & Co., a KTP community for film photographers. And then lastly, in the link below, I have a link to the Thrive Guide. It's a awesome resource that I've put together for the times. There's definitely a lot going on with the virus in the world right now, and a lot of us are stuck at home working, and I've compiled a bunch of tips and tricks and a lot of images and just a lot of resources for you to just really own working at home. And so you can find the link to this down below. It's called the Thrive Guide. I'm really excited to share this with you. People have just loved this so far. I've gotten so many emails thanking me for this, and it's not a bragging right, but it's definitely out of service, and I'm so glad to provide this for you. This is a lot of insight into my personal work schedule, my work routine, just a lot of strategies and tips and tricks for you to help you through this whole COVID-19 thing that's going on. So I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you so much, Candace and Rebecca, for sending me your images. I hope to hear from you, and I hope that you enjoyed this. So I will talk to you guys next time. Bye.